can you tell us a bit about your experiences of social care since you were diagnosed with young onset dementia?
Well, when first diagnosed, what tends to happen is that you get an automatic referral to a social worker initially to do an assessment of needs.
Yeah.
But then, given that you're at the start of your journey, it's, it will be unusual for any services to be made available to you because you are at that early stage. So basically, you tend to get, well, I was told that, you have no needs because I could wash myself, dress myself, feed myself, and I was walking around. So I was fine. So there was no further input, and it was, although not expressed as such, kind of a okay, go away and come back when you're worse kind of thing, which isn't very helpful because you concentrate on the physical, you're missing out on so much more. Dementia is very much, to a large degree, an invisible
Yeah.
condition. And so there's so much more happening, which if you get in with early intervention, you then empower that person to be able to remain active and independent for an awful lot longer before they start to rely on heavy input or service needs. So not only is it better for that person, it works out better for social services because the cost of any support is cheaper. Because if you wait until someone is at the point where they're in needing a full-time care support package or needing quite a hefty amount of care, or certainly if you're waiting around until you're called in to prepare an emergency care package, that's a hell of a lot more expensive. So the aim is to keep someone as independent as possible for as long as possible, and then also that builds towards the fact that even if that person eventually goes into full-time care, that will be a shorter amount of time that they're reliant on that what's a very expensive care provision.
So taking you back to the time where you were told you didn't qualify for the support, how did you manage in that situation? What did you do to try and overcome that?
Well, pretty much because of my social work background, knew what was coming. So sort of wasn't surprised really. But the problem was that because there was no input whatsoever, it meant that I had to rely on my own mettle as to going out there and finding out what was right for me. Because with dementia generally, because most people are older, when it's young onset, even if you try to access the local groups around you, it's mostly people who are very much older, different stage of life, different family setup and home environment, and what happens is that you end up speaking to care partners, but there's no sitting down and speaking to someone about, well, I'm in this situation. How do you manage? Say, you might have dependent children still. You might be trying to hang on to a job. those kind of issues, which you wouldn't have in later life.
Yeah, yeah. So there must have been times during the time since you were diagnosed where you felt you needed perhaps some aids or adaptations or something in the home. Have you found that easy to get hold of, or have you
No,
found that
I
support?
found there's been no support because with other conditions, you tend to get referred to physios and OT to make those assessments and bring in the right equipment. Because it was dementia, I didn't get referred to those services. So as my balance became more of an issue and I became less mobile, I was having to go out and try to find my own way through those problems and find out what might be useful to me. And sometimes I made right decisions, luckily, and sometimes I made wrong ones, and the wrong ones are very expensive. And that becomes an issue because, I was relying on benefits.
Yes, 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 of course. So thinking about the support that you found most useful, I know you mentioned to me before that often peer support is something that you found really useful.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about how you got some peer support?
Well, initially, like I said, I was going around to the groups which existed, but they were all set up around the needs of much older people than myself. And at that time, we still had an Alzheimer's Society office locally. And so I went back to them and said, um, is there a place for people of my age to meet and talk? And they said, oh no, there isn't anything. So at least I had the professional experience of um, being involved in facilitating groups and things like that. So I said, well, in that case, I'll open up my own young onset group. So I did that. I went out and I researched and I found a place that was suitable, that wasn't going to be too clinical, that was going to be accessible, and that was fairly central. And so what we could do is have that place for people to come to. Um, and, we were only, because we were a minority group of people among people with dementia, we were never going to be um, made up of a vast number of people. It was
No.
only a small group, but it turned out to be really useful because you had that ability that when people came in, because it was a small group, they felt it much more easier to talk and express what they were going through. It became a bunch of friends who would meet up socially rather than a formalised group that was managed.
Yeah. So thinking about how it should be, are there perhaps one or two things that you'd like to mention about how it should be for somebody living with young onset dementia and their families?
It would have been really nice if there was some named worker that I could stay in touch with, because the dementia services right across the country are so split between different groups. It's rare to find any dementia pathway somewhere. So it's kind of older person services, it's mental health, it's frailty services. And so trying to find anyone to relate to who can, like, say, if you had illness and you had cancer, they will be helping you liaise between the different groups.
Yes.
And if you were lucky enough to have an admiral nurse, then they will be helping you navigate that way through. But most areas don't have admiral nurses. They we need an awful lot more. And so it would be nice if there was someone who was going to stay connected, because at the moment you only have intervention from a social worker for a short period of time, and then they close the books.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a case of, if you need anything from social care, get back in touch. Then you've got to be speaking to a different person, going through all over again your history and explanation of how you are. If you could go back to the same person who met you before and say, well, this area is more of a struggle now, and I would find this helpful, that would mean a smoother path through.
Yes.
And that person would or should be able to know who are the right people to deal with that situation and signpost you up.